The road to Thanos continues to unfold as we get closer and closer to Infinity War. This is part 2, the plan of Ultron. Welcome to Durbania, I'm Durbin, and this is my theological analysis for Avengers, Age of Ultron, Part 2 in my road to Thanos as we build towards Infinity War. I'm so flippin' excited to get into Infinity War. Last week I talked about how I see Thanos, and I see Thanos as the powers, the principalities, those wicked hosts in heavenly places. Like, that's who he is. And if he wants to come to the earth, he has to prepare the earth for his coming. So if the Avengers is representative of the light that can overcome him, the light that can defeat him, then what's he got to do? He's got to get that house to be divided against itself so that it cannot stand. And so not being able to stand, then he can just walk on this earth and do whatever he wants. So this is the road to Thanos. Thanos preparing the world for his coming. Last week, we took a look at Loki's mission. His mission was to get the Avengers fighting each other. That way they never ever unify to begin with. He failed. Now we're diving into part 2 of this, Ultron's mission. In the beginning of this, Ultron really reveals his plan when he's bragging about himself to Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, when he basically says this:
I have what the Avengers never will, harmony.
See, he thinks he's the most harmonious being in the world, and thus he can get a whole bunch of stuff done. But what he knows he has to do is break apart the harmony of the Avengers, that way they're unable to stand. Now, this is slightly different than what Loki was trying to do. Loki was just trying to get them to fight each other and be completely distracted. But Ultron is going a layer deeper. Ultron's all about not just getting the Avengers to fight with each other, that way they're distracted, and that way he could just do whatever he wants. That's not what he wants at all. Nor does he want to kill them and have them become martyrs and then the world unite behind, their memory and what they did. So he doesn't want any of those things. What does he want? He wants them tripping over each other. See, he thinks he's such a harmonious being and he could get so much done. He sees the potential in these beings being in harmony with each other. So what does he want to do? He wants to disrupt their harmony. Not just by having them fight each other, but by going a layer deeper. Going into each of them individually and their own faults, their own struggles, those things that they deal with inside themselves, pulling that out. So they're stumbling over themselves, thus they're stumbling over each other. I think a good way to look at this picture is a way that C.S. Lewis looked at this picture. He looked at humanity in two ways. One way, he uses a picture of a fleet of ships. It's impressive when you look on and you see a fleet of ships coming on. But he says two things about this fleet of ships. The voyage will be a success only in the first place if the ships do not collide and get in one another's way. And secondly, if each ship is seaworthy and has her engines in good order. So the ship, they need to be going together in harmony, but they got to have each individual ship the insides in harmony. So it's not just about the fleet being in harmony. It's not just about the multiple ships in formation going in one direction with harmony, but it's about inside each individual ship, the engines being in good order, so it's seaworthy. The steering mechanisms in good order, so they're not like constantly colliding with each other. Things need to be running smoothly inside each individual ship, which then allows the whole fleet to move in order. Another picture he uses is this: humanity as a band playing a tune. Each player's individual instrument must be in tune, and also each must come in at the right moment so as to combine with all the others. The truth presented in both of these pictures is this: a lot of times we human beings tend to think that, our vices are our own. So what we do, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, is fine. We can indulge in this vice. We can do this thing however we want, because if it doesn't hurt anybody else, it's fine. But in this picture of humanity, when you're in a band and you're playing a tune and somebody's out of practice or somebody's out of tune, it affects Everybody. When you're in a fleet of ships, if the engines aren't running smoothly, or if the steering mechanism hasn't been checked and it's not going right, if the soldiers in the one ship aren't doing their job correctly, it could spell bad things, not just for the one ship, but for all the rest of the fleet for numerous reasons. In other words, we're not islands. We're not like secluded off on our own little thing. So while we think we're indulging vices, how could it be bad if it doesn't hurt everybody else? Well, it does. Ultron knows this. This is what he's going for with the Avengers, to go to each of them individually and hit them all at home.
You and I can hurt them, but you will tear them apart from the inside.
So this is Ultron's plan. He wants to use Scarlet Witch as his secret weapon to stir up the strife, to stir up what's inside each individual Avenger so that they're stumbling over their own feet and thus causing each other to stumble. So that is his plan, to disrupt the harmony of this team. That when we see this movie start, dude, this team is in harmony. It is an epic opening scene with this movie. They're a fantastic team. So this is what Ultron has to do. He has to hit them individually where they live at home so they stumble over their own feet and therefore cause each other to stumble. Jesus had this to say about it. It's not what enters a man that defiles him. So he's talking about foods, clean and unclean. He's like, the picture here isn't the food you eat that makes you unclean, but it's what you have stored up in your heart. From the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so it's what comes out of a man that defiles him. Those words that come out from the heart, those actions that come out from the heart. It's those things that we rehearse inside that are bad. It's those things that we store up inside that are bad. It's those things that we store up inside and then come out in our words and our actions and our deeds. That's what defiles a man. This is where Scarlet Witch aims to hit each of them at home. First, she hits Tony Stark. And we see that in the very opening scene, that awesome battle. So he's the first one to kind of go out of tune here because he's already living in fear. She didn't plant fear inside of Tony Stark. Fear is there. We see that throughout all of Iron Man 3. He's dealing with post-traumatic stress from the first Avengers movie. Aliens scared the ever-living snot out of him. Their imminent return scares the ever-living snot out of him. He's afraid he's not enough to take on the alien threat. He's afraid he's not enough to protect what he loves most in the world. He's afraid he's not enough. And we see that when Scarlet Witch hits him in the eyes with that thing. Now, she doesn't give him a spell. She's not planting fear in him. She's not doing any of that. She stirred up what was already in there. So in this vision that he sees, aliens are returning. And in this vision that he sees, the Avengers are not just defeated, they are dead. And he goes up to Steve Rogers to feel for a pulse, and Steve Rogers says this to him.
You could have saved us.
You could have saved us. Did you hear that? That's Tony Stark's own guilt, that he's not enough, and that he didn't do enough to save the world. He didn't do enough to save his friends. And we continue to see that fear get stronger because why does he want to create Ultron? To put a suit of armor around the world. Bruce Banner says, that's a cold world, Tony. But you see, that's how Tony deals with fear. He wants to protect himself, protect his vulnerability. He wants to protect it and hide himself in a shell of armor. He wants to project that out and hide the Earth, in a sense, a shell of armor. Ultron is that shell of armor, that bouncer for peace in his time. So they don't need to fight. They don't need to be heroes. And he's done enough. But this is his worst fear, that he's not enough. So that's what she stirs up. When you put water in a water bottle and you put pressure on it, water comes out. Not orange juice, water. What you put in is what comes out when the pressure's on. So when Scarlet Witch stirs it up and just puts a little pressure on, this is what comes out. Look at Steve Rogers. What is his greatest fear? His greatest fear is what Ultron said to him to mock him. Ultron said,
God's righteous man, pretending you could live without a war.
That is something he's been thinking about it. We saw that in Winter Soldier. It's something he's been thinking about. Who is he without a battle to fight? Who is he without a war to fight? His worst fear? You see it right there. I mean, in that whole dance room, I mean, the whole thing is, it's not just a party, it's a war covered with a party facade. But when his girl, his best girl, shows up and he can finally have that dance with her, she says,
"The war's over, Steve. We can go home." Imagine it.
that room is symbolic of an empty life. That's what he's afraid of. Who is he without a war? And so now they're tripping over each other. Each of them gets lost in their visions. Each of them gets lost in their thoughts. Each of them gets lost in something that they've been feeding themselves, that is stored up in here, that they've been rehearsing. And now they're stumbling over their own feet, and they're causing each other to stumble. So Ultron, using Scarlet Witch as a weapon, has successfully disrupted their harmony. So what on this green earth do we do? We're all human, right? We all are imperfect. We all make mistakes. We all have fears in here. We all have anger in here. We all have guilt in here because we're not perfect. So there's always going to be a conflict within ourselves. So then what's the point of me saying what I'm saying? It's because it's what you rehearse. It's what you feed that gains the upper hand. It's what we continue to put in is what continues to get stronger. So this amazing scene between Scarlet Witch and Hawkeye is incredibly telling because this is where Scarlet Witch now knows the truth about Ultron, and she played right into his hand. But now as they're sitting here on this island that's floating up into the sky, she is consumed and immobilized by guilt. She was fighting, but now she is frozen in guilt. I would say fear, but I think it's guilt because you hear her say it. It's guilt about what she and her brother have done. She can't get over it. But this is where Hawkeye has some awesome advice for her.
Doesn't matter what you did or what you were. If you go out there, you fight, and you fight to kill. Stay in here, you're good. I'll send your brother to come find you, but if you step out that door, you are an Avenger.
See, he can't do his job and babysit. He's fine if she stays in that room and he can get her brother to her. He's fine with that. But if she's going to step out and fight, then she's got to step out and fight. Kind of like when a ship is in the fleet, well, then it's just got to be in the fleet. Kind of like when you are in a symphony and you're playing that instrument, you just got to play, and you got to play it to the best of your ability. You can't sit there and be consumed by insecurities. You can't be consumed by that. You have to step out in boldness and in faith and just do it. This is the message Hawkeye is sending to Scarlet Witch. You want to stay here? That's fine. But if you step out the door, you're an Avenger. Whose fault is this? Who cares? When you step out the door, you're an Avenger. You got to have my back, and I got to have your back. We got to count on each other like that. But she makes a choice. She chooses to put that guilt aside, and she chooses to be an Avenger. In Civil War and later movies, we see she still deals with that guilt. It's one of the central plot lines of Civil War. But also one of the central plot lines of Civil War is her learning to get up and stand up and make the choice of who she wants to be and who she's going to be. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. When we let Jesus in our lives, the Holy Spirit comes and lives inside of us. Now, those are called fruits because, fruits grow from seeds. So the Holy Spirit plants those seeds in us. When he's in our life, those things, the love, the forbearance, the peace, the patience, it's there. We have it. We are equipped with it when we let Jesus inside. Now, we have a choice. What are we going to grow in our lives? What are we going to water? Have we made huge mistakes? Are we going to water the guilt? Are we going to continue to go over that? Or are we going to look at God's promise? If we confess our sins, he is faithful to forgive us and cleanse us of all unrighteousness. What about he'll cast our sins further away than the east is from the west? So the moment we confess and let God in our lives, he forgives us. It's not just forgiven, it's gone. Fear and anxiety is a real thing in life. It's a real thing that I've dealt with in life. And I've had to go and pick up my Bible and look at God's promises that if I cast my cares on him, he cares for me. That I don't have to worry about tomorrow because sufficient today is just today's problems. He will supply my needs. It says in one of the Psalms, I shall not lack. Why? Because God is my shepherd. So rather than being anxious about things, drinking in God's promises and rehearsing those inside, feeding myself those promises and rehearsing those rather than rehearsing the fears, and then the promises continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger. Those things that we invite inside, we got to be careful what we invite inside. We got to be careful what we're going to rehearse. We all have insecurities. We do. We all have fears. We all have anger. We all have things inside that we're in conflict with. The question is, what side of that conflict will we feed? It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be sad. But then we got to remember, God gives us promises to meet all of those things. He comforts those who mourn. He gives us strength, he gives us forgiveness, and he gives it to us to also give out to others. He puts these gifts inside, so as we water those seeds, as we rehearse those gifts become the gifts that get stronger. That's what we see Scarlet Witch do by the end of Age of Ultron. It's what we see her persist in doing when we get into Civil War. She constantly has a conflict with inside, but she's the picture of what is she going to exercise? What seed is she going to water? Is it going to be the fruit of the Spirit? Or is it gonna be those weeds? When you watch Avengers Age of Ultron, what are your thoughts with this movie? What picture do you see? How excited are you for Infinity War? Be sure to let me know in the comments, and while you're there, hit the subscribe button to become a Durbanian. Hit the bell by the subscribe button. That way you're notified the moment I drop another theological analysis, my next video, part 3 in my road to Thanos coming next week. Yes! And then you'll be notified when I drop my movie review for Infinity War. Yes! I'm so excited for that. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, and in the comments, what do you see when you watch Age of Ultron? Can't wait to have this conversation with you. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.